HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The History of Rome in 12 Buildings, a travel companion to the hidden secrets of the Eternal City, by Phillip Barlag, read by Stephen Graybill. Preface. I first went to Rome in early 2003. My wife and I had been married for just over a year and had taken advantage of a deeply discounted airline fare. Our tickets were $330 for a round trip. $1 more and we couldn't have afforded it. Like so many newlyweds, we were broke. When we landed at the airport, we took a train to Termini Station. As the train approached the city, it slid through a gap in a massive ancient wall. I was awestruck. It was one thing to see the wall from either side, but by passing through it, we got a unique look at how massive this structure was. I wanted to know more. After asking around, I was told that these were the walls of Aurelian. Who was Aurelian? I'd heard of Marcus Aurelius. Was that the same person? It occurred to me that I knew the Roman Empire had dominated what is now Europe for a long time. I had heard of Caesar, Nero, Caligula, and Constantine, but knew very little about them. The name Caesar Augustus rang a bell. Was this the same as Caesar? There was a lot to learn. I loved Rome. We had an amazing time. We walked countless miles every day, crisscrossing the city, taking in as much as we could. There was greater depth to the history of the city and its people than I could have imagined. My knowledge needed some augmentation. I vowed that if I ever returned, then I would be well prepared. That first trip sparked an interest in Roman history that I carry to this day. I've learned a lot about the city, the people, and the empire. The more I learned, the more I found myself saying, I wish I had known that when I was in Rome. This book is written to provide stories, ideas, and secrets that will make a trip to Rome more enjoyable, vivid, and satisfying. I have endeavored to write the book I wish I'd had for myself before my first trip to Rome. This book is not only for first-time visitors, but also to help anyone revisiting Rome have an even greater appreciation of what awaits. I've been back to Rome several times. No matter how much I think I know, I always learn more, experiencing the city anew. Rome is known as the Eternal City. It's an appropriate moniker. Whether someone is going for their first time or their 100th, there's always something awaiting discovery. All that's needed is knowing where to start. Introduction. Every trip to Rome is special. No matter how many times someone has been there, nothing compares to the feeling you get when you arrive in the city and look around. It's magnificent and overwhelming. Think of Rome as a sprawling outdoor museum. Within this museum, there's a special exhibition, The Sights of Ancient Rome. Any good museum curates its collections to tell a distinct story. Nothing has a need for curation like a trip to Rome. This book is a way to have a curated experience in Rome, with each chapter covering a different period of Rome's history, brought to life through the places and buildings of the city. There's something special about standing next to a monument and knowing the context, not just who built it, but why. There are 12 chapters to this book. Each chapter is divided into 3 sections. The first is a close look at the history of a building or monument. The second is a guide to a few close-by dining options, as well as websites for travel information, hours, admission fees, and so on. The third takes a quick look at another building that continues the story before moving on. This book will use the Colosseum as a point of common reference for walking and travel times. The Colosseum is in the middle of all of Rome's landmarks, and, should anyone ever get lost, any local can help you find your way back there. All sections will give you walking times from the Colosseum, as well as the closest metro station. A good laminated street map would greatly aid your time in Rome. The Borch map is excellent, as is Michelin's. Some monuments have their own websites and phone numbers. Others point visitors to a centralized tourist information line. Dining options are rated on a $1 to $3 scale. Affordable, moderately expensive, and expensive for the purposes of this audiobook. This book is organized chronologically, not geographically. Some places are close to one another, others further afield. If you visit the buildings in the order they appear, then you will find yourself crisscrossing the city. This can be rewarding, giving the traveler the chance to make their own discoveries at points in between. One way to use this book is to listen to each section before you visit the building. Another is to listen to all the chapters and then decide what you want to see for yourself. Yet a third is to decide when you arrive at any of the locations. Whether you are planning a trip to Rome, already there, or just interested in the city's history, I hope you enjoy this book and find it helpful. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Via Sacra. All roads lead to Rome, or so the saying goes. What is now a way of saying there are many ways to get to the same outcome was once much closer to literal truth. The idea of empire is so associated with ancient Rome, it is sometimes difficult to remember a time before empire, a time when Rome was just one ambitious and expansionist city on a continent of ambitious and expansionist cities. Nothing tells the story of the rise of Rome, from its mythological founding at the teats of a wolf mother to its glorious empirical heights, than its roads. And one road in particular, the Via Sacra, or Sacred Way, may tell the legend best. Let us begin with those first Romans, the twins, Romulus and Remus. After being abandoned in a basket by the Tiber River by their mother, they were suckled by a benevolent she-wolf. There they were found by a kindly shepherd and his wife, who raised them until becoming aware of their origins. It turns out that Mom was a priestess and the daughter of a deposed king of a nearby city. Once the twins figured out their regal connection, they helped their grandfather reclaim his throne, then set out to create a kingdom of their own. Legend has it that Romulus wanted to found their settlement on the Palatine Hill, whereas Remus preferred the Aventine. The argument boiled over, Romulus murdered his brother and became the first king of Rome. The Palatine it was then. From that day forward, an address on the Palatine Hill defined fashion, elegance, and power. Today it is the origin of words such as palace and palatial. It is unlikely that Romulus and Remus were historical figures, but violence and bloodshed lie at the root of the Roman legend, an appropriate foreshadowing of the Roman legacy. From the time of its founding, often given as 753 BCE, Rome existed in a near-constant state of warfare. Romulus and his descendants fought war after war, securing Rome's place as a regional power in central Italy. As Rome's power spread, so too did the Forum, a complex of buildings and public spaces that came to be the center of life for Romans of all walks of life. Rich and poor, patrician and plebeian, proud and humble, people from every slice of Roman society mingled there. Part outdoor market, part gathering place, the Forum is where court cases were decided, vendors hawked their wares, and business deals were struck. As Rome grew a greater foothold, the Forum grew with it. Rome's second king, Numa Pompilius, was unusual for a Roman ruler in that he eschewed war for peace. He added the temple of Janus to the Forum. The Roman god Janus was a deity of transitions. He looked after things such as birth, death, time, and doorways. Numa's temple doors would be opened in times of war and closed in times of peace. He promptly closed the doors, symbolizing that, through his rule, Rome was at peace. Unfortunately, the doors of Numa's temple of Janus were flung open by his successor, the war-loving Tullus Hostilius, who returned to expansionism and sent armies back into battle. The doors to the temple of Janus would remain open for the next 400 years. That's a long time to be at war. After 4 centuries of constant warfare, the Romans had dramatically expanded their sphere of influence. Finally, an exhausted populace celebrated as the doors were closed, heralding a new era of peace and prosperity. And there they would stay, closed, signaling peace after 400 years of fighting. For all of 8 years. It would be another 2 centuries of war, of the doors staying open. The Romans got in a lot of fights. Although these legendary figures in early Roman history likely didn't exist, the Temple of Janus was real enough, and the arc of history works. It is possible the historians invented the early kings of Rome to fit the known chronology. It's not clear how these myths arose, but it is clear that Rome was at war, a lot. After 250 years of the capricious and unaccountable rule of kings in 509 BCE, the frustrated aristocrats of Rome overthrew the monarchy and instituted a republic led by a senate. This did nothing to abate their martial spirit. They fought on. When visiting Rome, it's hard to remember its rise was not inevitable. The signs of empire and conquest are everywhere, but it took many centuries to forge the empire. Year after year, decade after decade, century after century, and war after bloody war. The Roman armies marched off time and time again, extending the influence of the city further and further, bit by bit. Consider that it took nearly 650 years before the Romans comfortably controlled the Italian peninsula. Its rise wasn't spectacular. It was gradual and relentless. As they conquered, they built roads. Roads made it faster, safer, and more efficient to move armies over the Italian peninsula and gave the Romans a huge military advantage. Rome's most famous road, the Appian Way, was built in 312 BCE to speed the army's route south to suppress their troublesome neighbors. Each new wave of Roman expansion found another people and more cities reluctant to yield power and privileges to the bellicose city on the Tiber River. Yet, more often than not, the Romans won. Victory brought glory to Rome and to the victorious general. Usually the Romans simply expected victory. On very rare occasions they decided to celebrate. A Roman victory parade was called a triumph. For a Roman general, a triumph was the highest honor that they could receive. This celebratory parade was the pinnacle of a career and spilled over into a massive public festival across the city. For centuries, Roman generals fought abroad in the hopes of being awarded the right to celebrate a triumph. On the big day, the winning general wore a gold-embroidered purple toga. His face was painted blood red in honor of the chief Roman god Jupiter. For just a day, the general could look semi-divine and kingly. After the overthrow of the monarchy, the Romans detested even the hint of kingship. To have such aspirations could be a death sentence. The Romans were paradoxically in awe of individual power and repulsed by it. So in order to keep the conquering hero grounded, a slave would ride along in the general's chariot and whisper in his ear a warning. "Remember, thou art but a man." In other words, don't get any ideas. Part of the triumphal regalia was a laurel wreath. Depictions of this iconic wreath have come to be one of the most ubiquitous symbols of strength, accomplishment, and victory. Most people have seen the image of the laurel wreath countless times. In this crown lies the origins of the expression, "Don't rest on your laurels," cautioning generals not to overly rely on their military conquest or the adulation of the people. On the day of the triumph, the general would line up his parade outside of the sacred boundary, or city line, called the pomerium. This was the only time soldiers were permitted to march inside the city lines, and the parade would duly wind itself across the boundary and into the city. Throngs of people would pour out into the streets, waving laurel sprigs and anxiously waiting to cheer the glorious accomplishments of the mighty Romans. As the parade grew closer to the center of the city, The crowds grew larger and louder, reaching a fever pitch as the procession neared the Forum. The general's chariot would be the focal point in a parade that included displays of the acts of heroism of the commander, spoils of war, and, when possible, captured and vanquished enemies marching in chains. For the hero, the greater the victory, the greater the show. The culmination of the triumph was entering the Forum by the Via Sacra, the sacred way. The final act was for the general to make his way through the adoring crowds and to the temple of Jupiter. As the awed crowd watched, the general would ascend the steps and offer sacrifices to the chief god of the Roman pantheon. After the sacrifices, the public would join in feasting, paid for by the largesse of the victorious general, eating and drinking themselves silly. Games and theater performances were also staged in the city. The party could last for days. Triumphs were exceedingly rare. Rome's conquests came in fits and starts stretched through centuries. A citizen might go a lifetime without seeing one. When they happened, it was a big deal. Of course, the Via Sacra wasn't only used for triumphs. In many ways, it was also ancient Rome's main street. The path, which seems so humble today, was where Rome conducted its business, a route that Romans walked every day into and out of the Forum. Untold millions of Romans, including the greatest among them, have walked the Via Sacra. With each footstep on the Via Sacra, you are walking with the titans of Roman history: Cicero, Pompey, Caesar, Augustus. You are watching as chariots clatter through the streets amid the adoring cheers of millions, celebrating another addition to the everlasting glory of Rome. It's easy enough to overlook. Many of the paving stones have been lost through the millennia. Many that remain are irregularly shaped and dusty. It's not a wide or grand boulevard. In fact, in some places it's just a few feet wide. Lost among the great buildings of Rome, this road doesn't get the attention it deserves. When you are in the Forum on the Via Sacra, don't just look at the soaring monuments. Look down at the deceptively humble road beneath your feet. Remember that nothing was witness to the rise of Rome like it. With each step on the Via Sacra, you are walking in the footsteps of Rome's greatest historical figures, and untold millions of others. The story of Rome was written along the Via Sacra. Rome didn't just arrive at the top of the world order, it walked there. How to get to the Via Sacra. The Via Sacra is within the imperial forums, admission fee required. There are two ways to get into the Forum. One, a block south of the Colosseum. The other, a block west of the Colosseum, along the Via di Fori Imperiali, the main thoroughfare running alongside the imperial forums. Whether you are walking from the Colosseum or coming from the Colosseo metro station, Line B, it's a short walk of about 10 minutes to either entrance. Once inside the Forum, it's easy to find the Via Sacra. It is the main street that connects many of the landmarks, such as the Arch of Septimus Severus, the Temple of Antonius and Faustina, and the Basilica of Maxentius. Local eats. Grab an inexpensive pizza or pasta dish in a down-to-earth spot. Trattoria Pizzeria Luzzi. It's affordable. On Via di San Giovanni in Laterano 88, postal code 00184. Their phone number is +39 06 709 6332, and they're on the web at trattorialuzzi.it. Trust the daily special to surprise and delight at La Taverna di Fori Imperiali. It's moderately expensive. On Via della Madonna di Monti 9, postal code 00184. Their phone number is +39 06 679 8643, and they're on the web at latavernadiforiimperiali.com. Debate what's better, the five-diamond service, or the fantastic views of ancient sites? Ristorante a Roma at Palazzo Manfredi, moderately expensive. Via La Bicana, 125, postal code 00184. Their phone number is +39 06 7759 1380, and they're on the web at aromarestaurant.it/en. Want more of the story before the next chapter? Stop by the Forum Boarium. The Roman Forum gets all the love. It and its friends, the forums of Trajan, Augustus, and the like, get a lot of attention. They should. Their buildings and monuments tell great stories. Roman armies vanquishing foes and expanding the borders, heroes cementing their legacy in stone, gods shining their protection down from heaven. But they don't tell the whole story. In fact, there's another forum, just down the road, that has something important to say. The Forum Boarium. Whereas its more famous cousins are named for the great people of Roman history or for the city itself, the Forum Boarium is named for cattle. Rome's eventual mastery of the known world was by no means assured. At the time of its founding, it was just another settlement on just another hill. But Rome was well situated and had geographic advantages that gave it a leg up. The hills were defensible. It overlooked a fordable bend in the river. Most importantly, it had access to the ocean via the Tiber, yet was still inland enough to be shielded from pirates and coastal raiders. As the city grew and projected its power outward, Rome needed a hub of commercial activity to support its growth. This is the Forum Boarium. The most notable buildings are the two ancient temples, the Temple of Hercules, the round one, and the Temple of Portunus, the rectangular one. Hercules was, of course, a legendary hero of superhuman strength. His temple is the oldest surviving marble building in Rome. Portunus was the god of doors, gateways, locks, and livestock. This was an appropriate area for a temple to the god. The Romans needed him here. The Forum Boarium was the true commercial heart of Rome. It was where the docks were located. Grain and livestock poured into the city to feed the growing populace. Granaries were there to store food for emergencies. Goods from all over the world made their way to Rome through the docks. In many ways, it was the gateway to Rome. This was the forum for the working man, the longshoreman of ancient Rome. This was the area where Rome was fed and clothed, where goods from luxuries to basic necessities worked their way into the economy. It seems appropriate the first gladiator games in Rome were fought there, 3 centuries before the Colosseum opened. While Roman armies marched over land, Roman merchants plied the waters of the Mediterranean. Opportunistic businessmen crossed Rome's frontiers, chasing the next deal, the next fortune. Often it was merchants, not armies, who made first contact with foreigners. Roman soldiers stayed close to their barracks, while Roman traders brazenly went forward into the unknown. Rome's primary business was business, not war. As you walk around, consider what it took to build the Roman Empire. More than armies, the workers and merchants of the Forum Boarium deserve their share of the credit too. Perhaps give a tip of the hat to Portunus. He might not be the most glamorous god in the Roman pantheon, but he did his job well. Address: Piazza della Bocca, della Verita. Nearest metro: Cerco Massimo, Line B. 12-minute walk. A 20-minute walk from the Colosseum. Tip: be sure to look for the Mouth of Truth, Bocca della Verita, just inside the portico of Santa Maria in the Cosmedin. Legend has it that if you lie while your hand is in the mouth, then it will be cut off. Chapter 2. Mamertine Prison. There are more than 900 churches in Rome. It can be hard to tell them apart. It's near impossible to see them all. Rome is, after all, the headquarters of one of the world's major religions, and centuries of emperors, foreign conquerors, popes, and kings have set out to display their benevolence and cement their legitimacy by building churches. When drawing up a list of things to do in Rome, the most famous churches, St. Peter's, San Giovanni in Laterano, Santa Maria Maggiore, are the usual. But one church, though humble compared to the majesty of its famous cousins, has an important story to tell. Not about the Catholic Church, but about pagan Rome's quest for empire. It's easy to overlook. The facade of San Giuseppe di Falegnami is not particularly ornate. It doesn't matter anyway. The church is closed to the public. The reason to visit this humble church is not for what's inside, but for what lies beneath. The church is built atop a much older building, one with a dark history. Find the church, then find the side entrance into the museum. By stepping off the street, you are traveling back thousands of years. Descend into the Mamertine prison. With each step down, you go further back in time, to the life and death struggle at the heart of the Roman world. Ancient Rome was defined by strife and conflict. Romans fought among themselves for political power. Classes fought with one another to assert their rights. More than anything, Rome fought with any city or foreign nation that stood in the way of its relentless expansion. Romans were aggressive, with neighbor and foreigner alike. As the little village on the Palatine grew, class conflict became more frequent. The families that traced their lineage back to the good old days with Romulus considered themselves to be of a higher order than everyone else. These families, the patricians, dominated political life in Rome for centuries. When the last king was tossed aside and the Republic was established, the patricians became even more insufferable. They controlled the government, the military, and the economy. They held the reins of power and liked it. Everyone else was not nearly as enamored of the situation. The people outside the formal power structure, the plebeians, grew tired of the situation. By the time the 500s BCE came to a close, things had reached a boiling point. The plebeians were the hard workers, whose labor was the backbone of the Roman economy. Tired of their oppression, the lack of representation in government, a huge swath of the population quit the city. In what might be the world's first labor strike, plebeians left Rome to camp out in protest on a hill outside of the city. Eventually they struck a deal with the patricians for greater class equality and better access to elected office, but the harmony was tenuous. It would flare up from time to time, occasionally bringing the economy to a standstill. Disagreements between the classes were stunting Rome's growth. Not long after the first strike, the ambiguity of the legal system had to be addressed. In 449 BCE, after careful work and several drafts by appointed committees, Roman elders published a thorough formal law code. Called the 12 Tables, the Roman society had now explicit rules to govern things, such as the conduct of its citizens and the class distinctions between patrician and plebeian. More than 300 years since its founding, Rome was on firm footing when it came to law and order. The 12 Tables were one of the most sophisticated law codes of the ancient world. They are still influencing law around the world today. As the Roman system matured into a society bound by law and courts, defenses and prosecutions, it oddly lacked something that we closely associate with such modern institutions: prisons. For a society so enamored with the law and saturated with the rhetoric of right and wrong, it seems surprising that the concept of imprisonment was foreign to the Romans. If someone had broken a law or a social contract, or proven to be an implacable enemy of the Republic, then they needed to be gotten rid of, not held in perpetual confinement at the expense of the state. You are either guilty or innocent, a free citizen or an enemy. You could either live in Rome freely or be exiled or executed. It makes sense for the Romans, who had a god dedicated to boundaries, to draw such clear lines. That didn't mean legal cases were always quickly adjudicated, or that
Sample complete. Ready to continue?